100 years ago, a man stood before an audience in Europe at a time when the world was still licking the wounds of the Great War and uttered a name that the unseen architects of our reality never wished to be spoken aloud. Rudolf Steiner, the initiate of spiritual science, did not whisper this name in metaphors, nor did he hide it behind the veils of abstract symbolism. With surgical precision, he identified the force that governs the machinery of material existence, the entity that shapes how we perceive, how we think, and what we believe to be possible. That name was deliberately buried in the decades that followed. His writings were burned, his lectures interrupted, and his life threatened by those who, consciously or not, served the secret he had revealed. What power holds a name that needs to be erased from collective memory? What truth did Steiner touch upon that made him so dangerous to the structures that govern our world? You have felt it without being able to name it. The palpable sensation that something invisible governs not only your choices, but the very texture of your attention, your sense of what is real. The modern world, in its cinematic terminology, calls this the Matrix, this web of control that reduces human consciousness to a mechanical response, that converts souls into data points, that convinces you that only what can be measured, weighed, and counted exists. But this is not a modern phenomenon. Steiner saw it operating a century ago, long before digital screens, before predictive algorithms, before the technological web that now holds billions in its cold embrace. The tools have evolved, become more sophisticated and ubiquitous, but the architect remains unchanged. This entity does not influence our world merely from some distant and ethereal spiritual realm. According to Steiner, it seeks something far more direct, far more total. She seeks fusion. And in this deep dive, you will discover not only what Steiner named, but what he warned would come, what he saw manifesting in our time, and why your awareness of this force is the first step, and perhaps the only possible step, to breaking its hold on your consciousness. The architecture of control has always required invisibility to function effectively. It's an unspoken law. The moment you see the cell, you begin to question its necessity and search for the keys. Steiner understood this principle when he chose to violate the ancient spiritual law of silence regarding certain adverse entities. There are forces that thrive in the shadows of human ignorance, growing stronger the less we speak of them, the less we recognize their fingerprints in our thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. By naming Ahriman directly, Steiner performed an act of spiritual revelation that still resonates with those capable of hearing. He didn't speak to entertain intellectual curiosity or to frighten the faint of heart. He spoke to awaken. And what he revealed transforms everything you believe about the nature of the world you inhabit. In Steiner's cosmology, Ahriman represents the titanic force that seeks to imprison human consciousness entirely within the limits of material existence. The Ahrimanic goal is to convince the soul that it is nothing more than flesh, chemical reactions, electrical impulses firing in gray matter. Ahriman is the prince of solidification, the lord of absolute materialism, the entity that constantly whispers a devastating lie in the collective ear of humanity. You are only body, only brain, only a temporary arrangement of atoms destined to dissolve into nothingness. Every time you doubt the reality of your own soul, every time you reduce the mystery of love to neurochemistry, every time you accept death as absolute annihilation, you align yourself vibrationally and intellectually with the influence that Steiner identified. This is not a simplistic moral judgment. Steiner was not preaching a religious sermon. This is the recognition of a force with an evolutionary agenda that directly opposes human freedom. Steiner described Ahriman's strategy with remarkable and frightening clarity. This entity does not attack spirituality directly with fire and brimstone, which would create resistance and draw attention to its presence. Instead, Ahriman renders the spiritual dimension irrelevant, unnecessary, embarrassing to intelligent people. He accomplishes this through the seduction of one-sided materialistic science, the promise of total control through technology, the elevation of measurable reality as the only legitimate reality. Under Ahriman's influence, the universe becomes a clockwork mechanism without a clockmaker, a system of blind forces producing consciousness as an accidental byproduct, a sequence of chemical reactions that mean nothing beyond their immediate molecular interactions. The human being loses their cosmic dignity and becomes merely another component in a soulless machine. But Steiner was careful to clarify something essential, something that distinguishes anthroposophy from mere dualistic superstitions. This force is not evil in the sense that it must be destroyed. Ahriman represents disconnection, the severing of human consciousness from direct spiritual experience, the hardening of perception until only the surface of existence remains visible. In spiritual evolution, Ahriman paradoxically serves a necessary function. He grounds us. He is the weight that prevents us from floating. He develops our capacity for precise thought, for scientific observation, for separate individuality. The danger, the deadly poison, arises when this influence becomes exclusive, when the material dimension claims to be the totality of existence, when the tools that Ahriman provides become a prison instead of instruments of development. Steiner taught that recognizing this force does not mean blindly condemning it, but understanding its nature and refusing to be its unconscious instrument. Look around you now and observe the signs of the Ahrimanic presence saturating contemporary existence. The acceleration of technology is not merely human innovation following its natural course. Steiner predicted that Ahriman would use technological advancement to fragment human attention, making impossible the inner silence necessary for spiritual perception. Where there is constant noise, the spirit cannot speak. Every notification, every bright screen, every constant stimulus, every algorithmic manipulation of your focus, these are tools serving the Ahrimanic agenda of preventing you from being truly present, truly still, truly aware of the dimensions beyond the material surface. Your attention has become the battlefield where this force wages its primary campaign. The war is not for territory, it is for attention. Consider how your life has been colonized by the logic of quantification. Your happiness is measured in likes and engagement metrics. Your worth is determined by productivity scores. Your relationships are optimized by algorithms designed to keep you scrolling, buying, reacting. Even your body has become data, tracked, and analyzed reduced to numbers on a screen that tell you if you are healthy, if you are enough. Steiner predicted this reduction of the qualitative richness of human experience to mere quantity. This transformation of life, which is fluid and mysterious, into measurable units that can be controlled, predicted, manipulated. When everything meaningful about existence is translated into numbers, when the immeasurable dimensions of soul and spirit are dismissed as subjective fantasy, Ahriman achieves his deepest victory. Steiner uttered words that still resonate with shocking relevance. Ahriman works to make humankind forget its cosmic origin and accept the belief that consciousness emerged from nothing and will return to nothing. This spiritual amnesia is not accidental. It is a design. It is cultivated through educational systems that never mention the soul, through cultural narratives that mock any suggestion of meaning beyond material processes, through social structures that reward those who play along with the mechanistic worldview and marginalize those who insist on depth. You have been trained since childhood to distrust your own spiritual intuitions, to dismiss as positive thinking the part of you that knows that you are more than your body, more than your thoughts, more than the role you play in the economic machinery. Herein lies a paradox that reveals Ahriman's fingerprints with particular clarity. Never in human history have we been so connected through technology, and never have we felt so profoundly isolated. You can contact anyone, anywhere, instantly. Yet, the experience of true communion between souls is becoming increasingly rare. Steiner would explain this as Ahriman offering substitutes for authentic connection, superficial interactions that momentarily satisfy, but ultimately deepen the inner void. The Ahrimanic strategy provides you with just enough simulation of contact to prevent you from seeking the real thing. It keeps you engaged with screens instead of presence, with curated personas instead of vulnerable truth. The epidemic of loneliness sweeping modern civilization is not a failure of connection technology. It is its hidden success. And there is another instrument that Ahriman wields with devastating effectiveness: the fear of death. Steiner taught that this terror of annihilation serves as the greatest ally of the Ahrimanic forces, keeping consciousness desperately clinging to material existence, unable to recognize its own eternal nature. When you believe that death is the ultimate enemy, that nothing lies beyond the dissolution of the body, you become infinitely controllable through fear. The promise of security, of extended life, of avoiding the end at any cost. These promises can make you surrender any freedom, accept any limitation, comply with any system that offers the illusion of protection against the void. But Steiner revealed that this fear is based on the fundamental lie that Ahriman whispers, that you are only matter, and matter is all that dies. However, Rudolf Steiner did not speak of Ahriman in isolation. He described a more complex spiritual dynamic, a dual influence acting upon human consciousness from opposing directions. If Ahriman pushes us toward materialistic imprisonment, toward coldness and sclerosis, there is another force, Lucifer, pulling us toward different dangers. Lucifer offers spiritual experience without grounding, mystical ecstasy without responsibility, visions without discernment. Where Ahriman negates the spirit entirely, Lucifer distorts it into escapism, spiritual vanity, and delusion. The matrix you inhabit is built by both forces working in a sinister coordination. One closes the door to spiritual reality with the weight of materialism. The other opens false doors leading to labyrinths of fantasy. Steiner taught that humankind must walk a razor's edge between these two influences. This is not a simplistic choice between materialism and spirituality, between science and mysticism, between earth and heaven. This is the cosmic challenge of maintaining balance, of remaining in the center where neither the crushing gravity of Ahriman nor the dissipating flight of Lucifer can dominate consciousness. This central point Steiner called the realm of the true self, the eternal individual core that is neither matter nor fantasy, but something that can encompass both without being consumed by either. This is the most difficult spiritual task, far more arduous than choosing sides, far more demanding than embracing one extreme or the other. Observe how contemporary culture constantly pushes you toward polarization. Either you must be a skeptic who ridicules any spiritual dimension as primitive superstition, Ahriman, or you must plunge into a new age spirituality so disconnected from reality that it becomes another form of escapism, Lucifer. Steiner saw this trap a century ago. The materialistic worldview and the world of spiritual fantasy are not opposites, but collaborators. Both serve to prevent you from finding the difficult middle path of engaged spiritual awareness. Steiner introduced another element into this cosmology that changes everything. He spoke of the Christ force, not as a dogmatic religious doctrine, but as the cosmic principle of balance, the power that allows human consciousness to remain centered. In Steiner's understanding, the Christ impulse represents the possibility of fully inhabiting material existence without being imprisoned by it, of engaging with spiritual reality without losing connection to earth. This is not about belief in historical events or theological positions. It is about recognizing a force in cosmic evolution that offers humanity the possibility of freedom from both types of imprisonment, the path between extremes. Now we come to Steiner's most controversial revelation, the one that caused tremors in spiritual circles at the time and continues to disturb those who encounter it today. In 1919, Rudolf Steiner made a precise statement. Ahriman would not remain merely an invisible influence. This entity would seek physical incarnation in the Western world. He would take human form and walk among us. Just as Christ consciousness incarnated 2,000 years ago, Ahriman would manifest in the flesh during the third millennium. This was not apocalyptic fantasy or symbolic metaphor. Steiner described it as a cosmic process, spiritual forces seeking direct influence through physical manifestation, and Ahriman's incarnation would represent the culmination of his strategy to permanently bind human consciousness to matter. What does it mean for a cosmic force to incarnate? Steiner explained that when such an entity takes physical form, it doesn't merely possess a body. It structures an entire era around it. Values, institutions, ways of thinking, cultural assumptions, technological development, everything begins to align with the nature of the incarnating force. Incarnation creates a field of influence that extends far beyond the individual, shaping the collective consciousness in ways that seem natural and inevitable. to those living within its sphere. Steiner was pointing to a reorganization of human civilization around Ahrimanic principles. Steiner identified specific signs that would indicate the approach of this incarnation: the supremacy of technological power over human wisdom, the worship of artificial intelligence. Although he used terms of his time to describe autonomous mechanistic thought as superior to human consciousness, the absolute denial of any reality beyond measurable matter, the establishment of total control systems through networks, the reduction of human value to economic productivity, the replacement of genuine community with simulated connection. According to Steiner, these are not random developments. They represent preparations. The ground is being prepared so that Ahriman finds a world receptive to his direct presence. When he incarnates, he will arrive in a reality already shaped to reflect his nature, already accepting his central assumptions as truth. But Steiner was clear about something essential. Recognizing this reality is not a call to fear or panic. Fear serves Ahriman. Fear paralyzes consciousness, makes you easy to control, dense, reactive. What Steiner offered was something far more powerful than fear. He offered awakened consciousness. Recognizing Ahrimanic influence removes its primary weapon, which is invisibility. When you see the patterns, when you understand the strategy, when you recognize which impulses in your own thinking align with this force, you cease to be its unconscious instrument. Knowledge does not give Ahriman more power over you. Knowledge removes the power he already possesses through your ignorance. So, how did Steiner teach us to resist? His answer may surprise those expecting dramatic spiritual practices or complex rituals. Steiner's path of resistance begins with something deceptively simple: free thought. Meditation as an act of conscious rebellion against forces that seek to fragment attention. In Steiner's understanding, meditative practice is not leisure or self-improvement. It is spiritual warfare waged in the realm of consciousness. Every moment you reclaim your attention from the constant tug of external stimuli, every second of genuine inner silence you achieve represents territory reclaimed from Ahrimanic influence. The battle for human freedom is being fought on the quality of your attention. Steiner developed rigorous exercises to cultivate what he called sense-free thinking. Ahriman thrives on automatic thinking, on inherited opinions you never questioned, on reactions programmed by culture and conditioning. The ability to observe your own thought process without being swept away by it, to hold an idea in consciousness and examine it from all angles without clinging to conclusions. This represents genuine liberation from invisible control. Steiner's epistemology was not abstract philosophy. It was practical instruction for breaking the chains of mechanical thinking that keep consciousness enslaved. Consider one of Steiner's most revolutionary statements, repeatedly uttered to his students. "Believe nothing I say. Investigate for yourselves." This was not false humility. Steiner understood that any external spiritual authority, no matter how benevolent, can become an instrument of imprisonment if you surrender your own capacity for direct investigation. Ahriman would be delighted if you simply replaced materialistic dogma with spiritual dogma. exchanging one set of unexamined beliefs for another. True freedom arises only from your own conscious exploration, your own direct experience. Steiner refused to create followers because followers remain dependent. And there is another dimension of resistance: the art and life of the soul. Steiner emphasized that modern existence has almost completely destroyed the cultivation of the genuine life of the soul. Feelings that are not algorithmic responses to engineered stimuli. The realm of Ahriman is calculation and mechanism. He can predict your reactions, manipulate your emotions, engineer your responses. But something remains in authentic human feeling that escapes calculation: the genuine experience of beauty in nature, the soul's recognition of truth, the sacred mourning of conscious loss. These inner states cannot be reproduced or controlled by Ahrimanic forces. Steiner defended art, genuine artistic creation and reception, as a portal through which consciousness can transcend material imprisonment. Whether through eurythmy, music, painting, or architecture, authentic art creates something that Ahriman cannot manufacture: beauty that moves the soul, forms that reveal spiritual realities. Art is resistance. Finally, we arrive at the heart of Steiner's teaching. The core of the human being, the I, remains free independently of the forces acting upon consciousness. You are, in essence, a being of freedom, temporarily experiencing limitation, but never definitively imprisoned. The matrix exists because you have forgotten who you are. Ahriman's power is entirely dependent on amnesia. The moment you remember your true nature, the moment you recognize the eternal consciousness that observes all experience without being destroyed by any experience, the prison reveals itself as constructed of belief, habit, fear, and forgetfulness. What is made of these materials can be undone through consciousness. In an era where Ahriman pushes us toward constant connection, shallow engagement, and perpetual stimulation, Steiner teaches the revolutionary value of conscious solitude. It is in true solitude, not suffering solitude, but chosen solitude, that the self is strengthened, that the hypnotic influence of the matrix weakens, that you discover what you're truly thinking versus what you've been told to think. Silence becomes sacred ground. Withdrawal from noise becomes a spiritual practice. 100 years ago, Steiner named the force. He didn't offer easy answers, but tools for insight. The question that matters now is not whether you believe what Steiner said. The question is whether you will look for yourself, whether you will test his observations against your own experience, whether you will develop the capacity to recognize the Ahrimanic influence in your own thinking. The door he opened remains open. The path he walked remains passable. But the potential only becomes real through your own effort, your own practice, your own decision to no longer be a sleepwalker through existence. Ahriman continues his operation. The world continues its race towards technological control. But you, having heard the name, having recognized the signs, what will you do now? Steiner did his part a century ago. The rest depends entirely on what you choose to do with what you now know. If this content touched something deep within you, leave a like, Comment with your observations on these forces and subscribe to the channel for more revelations that history has tried to forget.